Hey everybody, it's Pigeon back. I decided to upload a couple videos, so I'm going to be recording a couple videos back to back. I'm going to try out a couple different videos and styles and some different software, but we're going to hop back into another one of my decks. We're going to hop into Mama Helga right now, Skittish Stampede. It's what I call my Helga Skittish Seer deck. Mama Helga loves to ramp out an overwhelming amount of creatures. It's a battle cruiser style deck. It seems slow, but then it pops off. So the whole style with this deck is basically, I have another video on my channel about mono green, and I'm a very big fan of just green stompy decks. I used to play Kodama and Gilanra as my main deck for this, and when Helga got spoiled, I realized that this was right up my alley and fit the same thing, but I was also able to use white and blue. So I'm going to read the card real quick. It's Helga Skittish Seer, green, white, blue. I can actually pull this up for you guys so it's a little bit bigger. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain a life, and put a +1 counter on Helga Skittish Seer. You can also tap Helga and add X mana of any one color where X is her power. Spend this only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. So the important thing when you're building this is really to pick what kind of style you want the deck to be. For me, it was just a battle cruiser style deck, beat people's faces in, and be able to cast a lot of spells to get Helga's power up. Eventually be able to cast something ridiculous with her that just kind of closes out the game. So as you can see right here, very, very big creature package. I'm currently running 52 creatures, and as you can see, I'm running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are underneath the 4 cost, and all of them are mana. So I really try to focus on doing as much as I can around the 4 CMC mark and making the things over 4 impactful to the game. So I'm going to run through all of them. I won't spend a lot of time on every individual creature because most of them are pretty straightforward. So Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarch, Bloom Tender, and Fanatic of Ronus, obviously just mana dorks. Selvala is a mana dork that works kind of like our commander and also could be card draw. Fanatic usually taps for 4 green, which is pretty ridiculous. And then Bloom Tender usually taps for 3 as long as our commander's out, which is the whole game plan of this deck, so it's most likely going to be out. After that, we try to use the 4 for different kinds of pieces. So Beast Whisper, just a 2/3 whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. I try to use a ton of creatures that have draw on them, so that way we can try and keep our hand going and try to dump our hand out repeatedly before winning the game. Bramble Sovereign, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you could pay 1 and a green. When you do, that creature's controller creates a token copy of that creature. There are some legendaries in here, but most of these are impactful ETBs. So being able to create a second copy of something like a Moonshaker, Crater Hoof, or something like that is going to easily close out the game. Druid of Purification, when it enters, we all get to vote on an artifact or enchantment I don't control, and you get to destroy any of them chosen. So very good removal piece at 4 CMC on a creature. So this is going to gain us a life, draw us a card, and at least remove 1 piece off of the board if everybody decides on the same piece, but usually they don't. Forgotten Ancient is a powerhouse in this deck. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto another creature. So what you could do with this is play this, turn goes around, maybe 5 spells get cast. At the beginning of your turn, you could put all 5 counters onto Helga. Now Helga is going to tap for at least 6 mana of 1 color, which is pretty crazy. I do run some invoke creatures and different things that have alternative casting costs in this deck, like Foundation Breaker. It's 3 and a green, but you can invoke it, which means you can cast it for its invoke cost. If you do, it's sacrificed when it enters. We'll still be able to cast it for the 4, though, because Helga only cares if the creature spell is 4 CMC. Because its actual mana cost is still 4, so it will trigger, as far as I'm understanding. But there's only one other card, I think, that's getting around that. So if I'm mistaken on that, please just comment and let me know so that I can quickly take this out of the deck. But when it ETBs, it blows up an artifact or enchantment. Gilonra, or Glen Elendra, Archmage, 3 and a blue flyer. You could sack it to counter target non-creature spell, and it has persist, so it's going to come back with a -1 counter on it, letting us do it again. Goreclaw is a 3 colorless 1 green bear. Makes it so all creatures with power 4 or greater cost 2 less. And then when he attacks, all of our creatures with power 4 or greater get +1/+1 and trample. Most of the creatures in this deck are over 4. There's a couple pieces in the areas that are a little bit below 4. But on average, this still gets to lower some of your big creatures down and make them into an area where you're actually able to cast them both on the same turn to get things like a Zapandrel and a Craterhoof to pop off on the same turn. Malleable Imposter, 3 in a blue. It's a flash flyer that could ETB as a copy of a creature an opponent had enter, but it also has flying. My favorite card, personally, the Luminous Broodmoth. It's a flying insect creature that whenever a creature dies, if it didn't have flying, it gets to come back with a flying counter on it. Oracle of Moldiah. You get to play with an additional land per turn. You play with the top card revealed. You may play lands from the top of your library. So just another good value piece. Phyrexian Metamorph enters as a copy of an artifact or a creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So you could use this on your own stuff or on your opponent's. Salia, Voice of Plenty. It's 3 and a white. You, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control all have hexproof. The bottom ability, you could pay 6 to put a +1 counter on each creature you control. Not very relevant, but a 3/4 flyer that protects our board is really what we're looking for in that area. Solemn Simulacrum, everybody knows them. Some can pronunciate them. Apparently I can't say the last part. But ETBs gets a basic land on the battlefield tapped. When it dies, you may draw a card. Sowing Mycospawn, it's 3 and a green. It has the Void, and it has Kicker for 1 and a colorless. When you cast it, you can search for any land card, put it on the battlefield, untapped, and then shuffle. And if you do kick it, you can actually exile target land. The target land part is kind of, if you want to do it, it's there. I mostly use it to just go get a bounce land to put back into my hand or different pieces to be able to help ramp out my board state. Ulvenwald Oddity, 2 colorless, 2 green, trample, haste, 4/4. But the big reason it's in there is when you flip it, it's a trample, haste, 8/8 that says other creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. So this is one of the big pieces. If you're able to ramp it out, you're actually able to flip it, then you can give the entire board haste, which might sound like it's a lot, but there's a lot of times where you're able to tap the commander for 8 to 10 mana, be able to play everything out, and then you could use your lands to do this if you would like. Venser, 2 colorless, 2 blue. It's flash. ETB, you could return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand, so a nice bit of interaction on a creature. Acidic Slime, 3 colorless, 2 green. Death Touch Ooze, 2/2. ETBs, destroys target artifact, enchantment, or land. Blossoming Bogbeast, 4 and a green. When it attacks, you gain 2 life, and then you give all your creatures +X and trample, where X is the number of life the amount of life you've gained this turn. Important to know that our commander does gain life. So this is naturally just going to give sometimes 3 or 4 buffs to your entire team and trample. Trockum Retriever. I don't have a ton of this style in the deck right now, but I think that it's something that I'm testing out. I just put this in here. But it has partner, which doesn't matter. It's a 5 cost 2/4, which doesn't really matter. But whenever you cast a spell during your turn, untap target creature. So you're able to cast a creature, and you're able to untap Helga, get a life, draw a card, and place another counter on her. So this basically allows you to play out most of your hand, and if you have the right pieces, most of your entire deck. Chulain, Teller of Tales. It's 2 in Bant. Human Druid, Vigilance, 2/4. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may draw a card. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, and then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So the land's going to come in untapped if that's okay. Or I guess if it's okay. If the land allows it, and you're going to draw a card, which is very nice. It also allows you to return a creature to your hand, which is sometimes very important. Being able to Craterhoof twice on a turn is pretty ridiculous, and this deck can easily do something like that. Grook's Pack Leader, 4 and a green. It's a 4/4 ETB. When a creature with power 3 or greater ETBs, draw a card. Green sleeves. 3 colorless, 2 green, elemental, protection from planeswalkers and from wizards. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, and whenever a land enters, you get a 3/3 badger. Heralds of... Not even going to try. 4 colorless, 1 blue demon. It's a 3/3 flyer with Cascade. Cascade works pretty well in this deck because you still cast when you Cascade. So you actually get to place a counter, gain a life, draw a card, reveal cards from top of your library, do it again. So it's very nice. As long as you don't hit something below it, you're going to be able to do it again. And as you'll see with the rest of the deck, you're most likely going to hit a creature that's going to matter. Silverback Elder, 2 colorless, 3 green, Ape Shaman. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you get to choose one. You either get to blow up an artifact or enchantment, look at the top 5, put a land from among them on the battlefield, the rest of the bottom of the library in a random order, or gain 4 life. Usually the life part doesn't matter, but it is pretty relevant to be able to do something like that. Usually I use the middle ability to be able to thin out my deck and help me hit more meaningful creatures. Smirking Spelljacker, 4 and a blue, flash flying, Djinn Wizard Rogue 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, exile target spell an opponent controls. And when it attacks, if a card is exiled with it, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. This is one of those big gotcha cards because most people that are running certain kinds of interaction in their deck are running interaction like counter spells that hit non-creature. At least from what I run into, not a lot of people are running OG counterspell nowadays, and most people aren't going to use a force of will on this, but it could happen. And you're able to actually exile their card and then cast it later on, which can be very nice if they cast a big game-ending spell or just a spell that you want. But either way, it's interaction on a creature, which is very nice. Tediova, 3 colorless, green, blue, 3/3. Whenever a land enters, gain a life and draw a card. Thyrex, the Sudden Storm, 3 colorless, 2 blue, elemental giant, flash flying, 4/5. Spells with mana value 5 or greater, cost 1 less, and can't be countered. Which, as you can see, we are about a little over halfway through our creatures, and I've already gone over, looks like about 8 or 9 that are all 5 CMC or greater. So this card is a absolute unit for this deck. Wandering Archaic, 5 colorless. It's an Avatar 4/4 that whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery, they may pay 2. If they don't, you may copy the spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. So this is a good piece of interaction, good ramp, good helpful thing. Just in general, we're running Bant, and we're mostly a creature deck. So being able to get somebody's Demonic Tutor or different things like that really help us out a bunch. And then the backside of it isn't really relevant, but I will read it just in case it ever comes up. For 3 colorless, it's a sorcery. Each player looks at the top 5 cards of their library, reveals a land and or instant or sorcery from among them, then puts the card they revealed into their hand, and the rest of the bottom of the library in a random order. Each player gains 3 life. So I never use it, but it's there if you need it. AC, pretty self-explanatory creature right there. Gives you an additional land drop when a land ETBs, draw a card. Avatar of Growth, this is my favorite card in the entire deck. It is a 4 colorless, 2 green elemental avatar 4/4 with trample that says it costs 1 less for each opponent you have. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent searches their library for 2 basic land cards, puts them onto the battlefield, untapped, then shuffles their library. So this gets to ramp me out 2 lands for a 3 CMC creature. This usually is the card that kind of starts breaking the game. If I'm able to cast this early on, this usually starts a big chain of me being able to do a lot on the next turn. Ezreroot Channeler, 5 colorless, 1 green, Treefolk Druid, 4/6 reach. Creature spells you cast cost X less, where X is the amount of life you've gained this turn, and you could tap to gain 2 life. Remember, our commander gains us life. This just existing on the battlefield is going to reduce all of our creature spells because of our commander. So, very nice piece. Kodama of the East Tree was the commander. I just slid it into the 99. Everybody knows it's 6/6 Spirit with Reach. Whenever a permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may put another permanent with equal or lesser from your hand onto the battlefield. I believe I do have technically a combo in the deck with this, because if you have we'll skip over to it right now just to show. Rampaging Baloths, 4 colorless, 2 green, beast, trample, 6/6, but it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. So what this allows you to do is play something like a bounce land, which the land will create a token. You then bounce the bounce land itself back to your hand. The token enters, you're allowed to put something into play equal or lesser mana cost. So you put the bounce land into play with that trigger, which is going to trigger Rampaging Baloths, and you get to repeat this process, putting the land back in your hand. This will allow you to create infinite tokens without haste, but you are able to use a couple different haste enablers in the deck to be able to close out from there. Oblivion Sower, another one of the cards I really, really love in this deck. It's 6 colorless, Eldrazi 5/8. Whenever you cast it, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of their library. You may put any number of lands from that player owns in exile onto the battlefield under your control. So this piece does amazing work for us. Number one, if you ever see a person's graveyard exiled and there's a couple lands in there, this is going to grab the ones that were already exiled as well. So very important to hit that person if you can. Really, the color doesn't matter too much because you usually have your color fixed. So it's really just the ramp that matters. But they also get put onto the battlefield under your control. Doesn't say tapped. So you just get to put a bunch of lands onto the battlefield untapped. You also could just hit a couple off the top. So even if you just want to cast it and see if you get anything, you usually hit a land or two, which is nice. Primordial Sage, 4 colorless, 2 green, spirit, 4/5. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may draw a card. We went over Baloths. Sakashima's Protege is 4 colorless, 2 blue, flash. It has Cascade for 3/1, and you may have it enter as a copy of any permanent that entered the battlefield this turn. This is very good to do at somebody's end step if they've had something decent come into play, because you're able to cast Sakashima, you're able to cascade into something that's going to enter, then Sakashima's Protege is going to resolve, which then you'll be able to copy either something that somebody already put out that's better or what you cascaded into. So being able to cast this during someone else's turn really gives you the option of what you would like to copy. Surok and Goreclaw, 4 colorless, 2 green. It's a human bear, I imagine separately, but they put it together. Trample, other creatures you control have trample, and whenever another non-token creature enters battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on it, it gains haste until end of turn. So this is another one of those pieces that if it's out and you get to go to your next turn, it's most likely GG. I don't think I've ever had this out for an entire turn cycle and then not won the next turn. It's just that good. Sweet Gum Recluse, another one of my favorite cards in the deck. 4 colorless, 2 green, flash, cascade, and reach. And when it enters the battlefield, put 3 +1/+1 counters on any number of target creatures that enter the battlefield this turn. So this is really nice if it just happens to be at the end of your turn and you want to pump up your board. But usually you're able to put out 2 creatures, put 6 counters total amongst the 2 creatures, and you get a 3/6 blocker out of Sweet Gum Recluse, which is very nice, especially because it has reach. Titan of Industry, 4 colorless, 3 green, elemental, reach, trample, 7/7. When it ETBs, you get to choose 2. You can either blow up an artifact or enchantment, target player gains 5 life, which I guess you could use as some kind of political thing, but I never have. Create a 4/4 rhino creature token, or put a shield counter on a creature you control. So just a good value piece all around. Now we get into the big heavy hitters, the things that close out the game or really, really, really change the pace. So the first one is the Pandrel, Hunger Dominus. 5 colorless, 2 green, Phyrexian Horror, reach, 4/6. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of creatures you control. You can also do 2 Phyrexian green, sacrifice 2 other creatures to put an indestructible counter on it. This is usually one of the cards, like I said, like all the cards below this pretty much, they usually just end the game, or they really, really, really change the pace. Craterhoof, everybody knows, buffs the entire board. Same thing as Moonshaker. These are both the big pieces that enter, give +X to creatures. So these are the 2 big pieces we want if we go to close out the game. Galta, Stampede Tyrant, newer include for me because I just picked one up. 5 colorless, 3 green, Elder Dinosaur, 12/12 with trample, which is already good value. But when it enters the battlefield, you could put any number of target creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So the downside is this isn't going to trigger your commander, but the upside is usually if this hits, you're able to put out 4 to 5 creatures straight onto the battlefield, which sometimes could be pieces like Sirach or different pieces that you could use to just close out the game right there. Kamal Hardcrosa, 6 colorless, 2 green, human druid, 5/5. At the beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample. And you can also pay a colorless and a green to turn one of your lands into a vigilance, indestructible, haste, 1/1 elemental creature. So another piece that if you're able to turn a couple lands into creatures and then you're able to play a Crater Hoof, you can easily close out the game. Moonshaker, I already said it, it's pretty much like Crater Hoof. Apex Devastator is 8 colorless, 2 green, Chimera Hydra, 10/10, and, of course, Cascade, 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 Cascade. This piece is ridiculous. Even when it's bad, it's still 4 extra pieces, and usually you're going to hit something above 4 CMC, so this is usually going to just snowball you into a crazy board state. Last time I played this, I was actually able to cast this, and I was able to cascade into 3 other creatures, and then my last cascade was Galta Stompy Tyrant. So then I used that to put all of my creatures from my hand onto the battlefield. And one of them ended up being Sirach earlier on, so I was able to close out the game then. Ulamog the Defiler. My friend Josh got me this for my birthday, so I had to put it into a deck that I was going to utilize it the best I could. It's 10 colorless, Eldrazi 7/7, and it has, whenever you cast a spell, target opponent exiles half their library rounded down. Its ward is sacrifice 2 permanents. When it enters the battlefield, it enters with number of 1/1 counters on it equal to the greatest mana value amongst cards in exile, period. And it has Annihilator X, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on it. Usually this thing is going to get above 5 counters, which is going to make it usually at least a 12/12 ward 2, sacrifice 2 permanents, Annihilator 5 at the very least, which Annihilator 5 is pretty much just GG. If you're able to get above 5, there's really not much your opponents could do. And finally, we have Galta. This is one of the secret lair arts for it, but it's just a 12/12 that costs 10 and 2 green. It has trample, but it costs less, equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So if you have a 10/10 out, you get to pay 2 green for a 12/12 with trample. So that's the basic creature package. Going over everything, obviously it's kind of a lot, but the important thing is pieces like Chulain and different things that give you card draw, Tyrex and Spelljacker, which are pieces you could use as interaction, and pieces that save your stuff, and then Crater Hoof and different things to close out the game. Other than that, you can kind of throw in your favorite creatures and kind of work around what you like, but that's the basic creature part of it. The rest of the deck is going to go by pretty fast because this is basically the majority of it all. So we'll hop down real quick. I'll just show all the things on the screen in case you guys just want to briefly go through them. And I'll even go down to the lands just to highlight the land part of it real quick. Not really much. This is just Mosswort Bridge, which is a hideaway land. Other than that, they're all lands. Nothing in here is too extravagant or surprising. But to go back up real quick, for the sorceries, all I run is Overwhelming Stampede. It's just an overrun effect. Creatures you control gain trample and +X/+X, where X is the greatest power amongst creatures you control. Just having 5 or 6 creatures out, this can just close out the game. So, very important piece. Legolas's Quick Reflexes. For 1 green, you get a split-second instant that untaps a creature. It gives it hexproof and reach, and whenever that creature becomes tapped, it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature. So this kind of just becomes the perfect card for this deck. Being able to tap Helga, maybe create 6 green mana, then being able to use one of your lands to untap Helga, you get to then have this stick that gets to kill somebody. Your creature has hexproof at split second, which means nobody else can interact to it, and then you're able to pop off and play your entire turn out. So very huge piece for this deck. Heroic Intervention, colorless and a green, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible. Fierce Guardianship, the only counter spell that I actually run in the deck. If you control your commander, it's free. Counter target non-creature spell. And Teferi's Protection, 2 colorless, 1 white until the end of your next turn. Your life total can't change. Your you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out, and then you exile Teferi's protection. So all 4 of the instances are just protection. That's all. Very simple. For artifacts, again, keep it very simple. Soul Ring, it's mana. Lightning Greaves, it's protection. The Great Hedge, it's ridiculous. Being able to pay 2 green for something that already taps for 2 green is crazy, but then it gains you life, which is pretty good. And it puts counters on creatures and draws cards. So this is just kind of a nutty card for the deck. And then 7 enchantments. So Coordinate Crossroads gives all creatures haste. Something you don't want to play early because remember, it gives all creatures haste, not just yours. But this is usually a piece that if you're able to play it later on, the game's over. Exploration, you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Hardened Scales is going to make it so all of our creatures above 4 are actually going to put 2 counters on Helga, gain us a life and draw a card. Growing Rites of Ichmog doesn't really matter on the front part. It's mostly you get to reveal the top 4, put a creature in your hand, and if you have 4 at the beginning of your end step, you may flip it into a Guy's Cradle. So just a ridiculous amount of mana for us. Kozilek's Unsealing, another card I'm testing out in the deck. Haven't ever been able to actually cast it and do much with it, but in theory it's very good. So for 2 and a blue, you get an enchantment that says whenever you cast a creature spell of mana value 4, 5, or 6, you get 2 Eldrazi spawns that you can tap to sacrifice to gain 1 colorless. And whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 7 or greater, you get to draw 3 cards. So just going back up real quick, for just the 7 or greater, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if any of those 8 come out that you cast, you'll be able to draw 3 cards. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 7 or greater. I can't remember if I said that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did. So for 9 of those, you'll be able to draw 3 cards. For the other ones, you'll get Mana Dorks. But don't forget that those Mana Dorks also can be Overwhelming Stampeded, Crater Hoofed, and other things into being absolutely ridiculously large units. Rhystic Study, opponent doesn't pay when you get a draw card. And then Working Predators, hey, we're running above 50 creatures. So whenever an opponent casts a spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it on the battlefield. Obviously, this doesn't work too well with certain pieces, like Ulamog won't trigger because you're not casting it. Apex Devastator won't get the triggers because you're not casting it. But usually throwing out a couple big creatures can still lead you into a win. Not to mention, any of these pieces just existing out usually are good enough. You know, the Retriever, the Bog Beast, and different things like that coming down on an opponent's turn can really be more impactful on your turn. So, very important piece of the deck. So that's basically it. I have a couple pieces in the considering. I'm not going to go over each of them, but most of them are cards I was running in the deck and I'm trying without, or pieces that I just didn't think impacted so well, like Sakashima, that I didn't really want to copy my commander. Not that it's bad, but at some point it just feels like it's a little bit too much to keep track of, and I was winning games without it. The Cultivator, just going and getting a basic land didn't seem like it was good enough for me. And Maelstrom Colossus, just paying 8 for 1 Cascade didn't feel as good when I have other pieces that do more. So, like I said, that's the deck. Mostly a green stompy creature deck. Here you go. Here's a playtest hand, I guess, since I already came down here. But yeah, it probably seems like one of those decks that at face value, or me talking about it, you might be sitting here thinking, oh, that seems pretty decent. But usually around turn 5 or 6, I have a board state large enough to kill the entire table. And the only way that doesn't happen is if people remove Helga with hard removal fast and early on, which people usually don't do because Helga's not the scariest piece on its own face value. Most people are like, okay, you gain away from draw a card. I don't really care that much, when there's other pieces out. But the 52 creatures in here also can act without the commander. So this still gets to be a big green stompy deck if you would like it to be, by using pieces like Selvala to fill in that place, for example. So if you guys have any questions about the deck, let me know. I love posting about big aggro stompy battle cruiser style decks, but I will let you guys in on the fact that I have a couple CDH decks I want to talk about. So pretty soon they will be getting uploaded. I'm going to record them right after this. So I appreciate you guys. Hope you guys have a good day.